Hello, everybody. I feel I have to send you a word since I have been drowning in emails about the Kennedy papers being released. Because, as you know, historian I am, um, a lot of time of my life is spent writing FOIA requests to get documents. So, of course, when we now have a new administration that came in on the promise to release JFK information, 9/11 information, information on a number of things, I, of course, sharpened my pen and have written everyone involved in the release of these documents for the World War II files, and I'm following up on that every week. However, JFK. So there was a massive document dump of JFK papers yesterday to the tune of somewhere between 60 and 81,000 pages. Um, a lot of the documents were actually PDFs, so they include a number of documents themselves. So if they say it's 18,000 documents, it comes out to some 80,000 pages. Um, it depends a little bit on how far you go and who you ask. However, let's say there's somewhere between 60 and 80,000 pages of information. What information is that? And what exactly did they do? Um, one word that comes to mind would be obfuscation, because a lot of the documents, from what I'm not a Kennedy historian guy into the JFK assassination. I'm not someone who's a specialist in this, but as a historian, obviously, I have listened to everybody from Jim Mars to watch the documentaries, watch the interviews with a lot of the players that were around that day, and with great interest because it's quite clear that what the narrative has been for all these years of what happened on that day is not true, which is an interesting parallel since we now live in a world where today's conspiracy is about 6 months from being proven the truth. And with all the disclosures of things today, it's a sad but interesting parallel that now we are shaking another previously established truth of what was that probably wasn't. And if you, I must well skip forward. So I am one of the people who was quite convinced that Lee Harvey Oswald did not shoot Kennedy. There was multiple people involved, and he was set up. And I base that on every honest, non-mainstream researcher I have seen and listened to, compiled information. That is my findings. There's been so much information come out over the years, and a lot of it should be go back to the findings of Jim Mars. And what I wish I had met him. He died not that many years ago. He was a reporter on the ground on that day in Dallas, and he have exhaustively followed um, every lead. And there are so many questions on that day, and there's so many doctored photos that don't match. And one of my favorite ones is everyone is still, I know Glenn Beck is out today, I believe, as I'm recording this on the shooting range, testing the Carcano to see if it could be done. Well, I always remember that as Officer Tibbet, who went up in the book depository, came down with a rifle, he held it up, the rifle, and said, "This is a Mauser." And that has never been explained. And Tippett knew his guns. He had a gun store. He knew the difference between a Mauser and a Carcano. And I don't believe a Carcano comes with a little pin clip. I don't think that's ever been found. There's just so many questions that I don't think these 80,000 pages are going to answer any of. I'm so sorry. If you release 80,000 pages, it is because maybe there's a few pages in there that are embarrassing or actually have a grain of truth pointing towards what really happened. The truth of what has been released is most of the documents that have been released before. with a lot of thousands and thousands of pages have been released before, some of them numerous times. So this is how the system is going to protect this. They're going to drown a few crucial documents in the middle of 80,000 other pages. There's a whole lot of stuff about CIA operations in America, which is, well, obviously illegal because that's not what the CIA was for, but they did anyway. There's some things, there's some notes about identifying the media assets the CIA had in the United States. There's also some identifiers of agents, and again, media, some by name and some by number, so they can be found, reference numbers, call signs, all that stuff. But this is not something we don't know. We know the CIA was deeply involved. Operation Mockingbird takes one with still been operating probably until today in some cases, where the intelligence services have been narrating the news we've been getting around the world for decades. We know this. We also know there's multiple entities involved in the Kennedy assassination and most other things. Some of the two Trump shooters, the last two Trump shooters, they have, there are links to intelligence services, domestic intelligence services, to them. I'm going to do a different video on just that because there's some very interesting links in them. Things that they are involved with some groups of people that have been doing, especially one of the last one that tried to take a shot at the golf course. He has some very dubious links for somebody who has no money or no means. And again, these people are being painted and portrayed just like the Las Vegas shooter, painted and portrayed in a certain way. Lee Harvey Oswald was painted and portrayed in a certain way. Lee Harvey had a IQ of over 118, and he was not a crazed loner. He had friends he talked to. There are some. There's quite a lot of interesting chatter, however, about how the Cubans were reaching out. They were getting tired of the Russians, and they were reaching out to Kennedy in order to open and normalize relations. Now, if the Cubans were reaching out to Kennedy, and that's one of the interesting, there are some interesting things in these papers. Just remember, it's going to take a bit of time to find them because they have drowned them in all these other papers that are irrelevant or have been seen before or have something to do with other things that is not really pertinent to this nature. Remember the last dump of Kennedy papers? I can't remember, those years ago. Very interesting thing. There's a document about the FBI searching for Hitler. In the middle of all of these documents related to Kennedy, there was a search result of how Hitler had been seen in South America. Of course, these are documents years ago. Just very interesting and out of the blue, but there are probably going to be some interesting things. One of the things that seemed to be standing out in these documents is that there were more than one shooter. Something that people who have researched this diligently have known for years. I don't think we are going to walk away from these 80,000 pages. For those of us who actually have studied and looked at the assassination and who was involved and how and when, where, I don't think we are going to look at all these pages and walk away with a changed mind. Maybe there's now enough papers circumstantial in here that it will now wake up the mainstream people who have believed in the story that has persisted since then, that is not the case. And this is one thing I want to stress to everybody. When we say, and we all know that the government has been lying to us forever about a number of things. It's something we all know in America, certainly now. A lot of Europeans, you still believe that your government is not lying to you. There's a narrative that has gone unquestioned for decades about every major event that you have accepted as fact because it came from the government and it came from the mainstream media outlets, and all the mainstream media outlets said the same thing, so it must be true. The interesting thing is they said exactly the same thing, word by word. If you look it up, it takes a little research. Can't do it all for you. And that's why this is an interesting discourse in Europe about what's going on in America today is because we have now seen, hands down, over the past 4 or 5 years, how the system have outright lied to us. And the Kennedy narrative is just another. You can then ask yourself, why have this lie been kept on for so long? Well, I think it was in '81. There was another hearing on the Kennedy assassination where it was stated that he was murdered as a result of a conspiracy, not to be followed up more. But already then, that is a pretty damn good indication. That was in the early '80s, so we know that's not what it was. And I feel it's really bad for Lee Harvey Oswald's wife because, well, there's another innocent that was caught up in this. Now, it's very interesting. Whatever will come out of this, what will be found, there are going to be little nuggets in the middle of all this. I'll be very surprised if anything comes out that will actively name who did this, because who in their right mind would put that in the files, and why would you think the files would then be found? These are paper files. We know after the Second World War, the OSS burned mountains of documents of what they did, and well, we don't know what they burned because they burned it. And a lot of the things I've been requesting are OSS files and then CIA files. So, and all the stuff they don't want us to see will just never be found. Some of it might be sitting in some of the, there are some, and I hope, and this is one of the things I will say when I have been reaching out to Luna Comer, Tulsi Gabbard, who is by far and away the most attractive director of national intelligence we have ever had. Let's just face it here. Hey, I'm a guy. That's a big deal. She's a very attractive woman. So I have been reaching out to her, and I hope they all understand that the files to be released are not sitting at the National Archive. They are sitting somewhere else. There are other depositories of classified informations that have not even been gone through. There's some very specific gathering places, archives, where all the way down to military units, military bases, intelligence offices, and they have sent boxes full of documents when they closed the office, relocated, or was outdated, not to be sorted like at the National Archive, but to eventually be sorted. These warehouses, there's one in particular, where all this documentation have gone and gone unsorted. There's no money to go through to figure out what can be declassified or not. That is where, places like that is where we will find what we're looking for if it hasn't been destroyed, which much of it, unfortunately, probably has, leaving us a slave to the narrative, or at least to what we can put together from circumstantial evidence. But just wanted to bring you all down just a little bit on the Kennedy papers. Don't hold your breath. There's not going to be a receipt for the bullets. Well, I guess they have the receipt for they claim they have the receipt for the bullet and the gun. They claim that he bought, and it was all, I guess one day Joseph and I could probably do a Kennedy follow up on all the things that have been discovered since. And I wonder if some of this is going to be brought to light or be brought back up. There are some amazing documentaries on what really happened and who was really involved, and how a lot of the people who were involved were assassinated in the years after. So I don't know if any of that is going to be brought up, because we're still talking about a mainstream release of thousands of documents that will take forever to go through. So we will see what comes out. I'm going to try to keep my eyes on the ball of the World War II, post-World War II documents that I'm looking for my research. And I will check in with some of the people I know who are far deeper into the Kennedy assassination than I am, to see if anything will really come out. But it once again is a reminder to be wary with the information you're getting and what you're seeing in the mainstream media, because, well, they're lying to you. They always have. Question is, was this a game by the CIA to the president and the new release just obfuscate by mere volume. Dear Mr. President, here's 80,000 pages. It's everything we have. Most of them were already released, so why are they packing them into this if it wasn't to hide something? So that's what they always do. And I have no idea if that has any relevance, to the current CIA headquarters being locked off by military and SWAT teams and having an active shooter situation. Apparently, somebody have been firing shots, and the SWAT bomb team, everybody's there, is surrounded the Virginia CIA headquarters, which I thought is very interesting. Happens the day after this. But they have all sorts of problems in there, and I hope whoever's in charge can actually get through all the compartmentalization and figure out what on earth they have actually been doing. Because we all question, what on earth have we actually been doing? And do remember that the CIA have funded a whole lot of their operations through USAID for around the world, and have done a lot of revolutions and government overthrow, and pushed a lot of elections, tweaked a lot of elections, hidden a lot of skewed elections, shall we say. Brazil, Europe in general. Where do you think the internet censorship comes from, and the direction of stories? You now have the technology where you can bury an internet story, or you can float it so it comes rise to the top and everybody finds it. You get the news out you want. That's what they've been doing forever. Maybe we get to see the dismantlement of that and just let news be news. And, well, there's a lot to that. But anyway, that was my take on the JFK papers. Can't wait for the 9/11 papers. Maybe they're going to find, the bits and pieces of that plane that hit the Pentagon. We'll figure out what happened to Building 7. I'm sure it'll be in there, surrounded by 10 billion other papers, and it'll be the last one closer to the bottom, if it's there. Anyway, have a nice Wednesday.